Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is to take, dense, sometimes really overwhelming source material and pull out the essential nuggets of knowledge, the context, those aha moments, and, well, the lasting truths that anchor history.
And today, we are undertaking what might be our most ambitious journey yet. We're tracing the final epoch-making pilgrimage of the Prophet Muhammad, an event universally known as the Farewell Hajj.
Right.
It's a 20-day journey, and it's tracked with incredible precision, and it serves as really the ultimate blueprint for religious practice and for societal justice.
And our source material for this is a remarkable Turkish work, Onunla Yirmi, which translates to 20 Days with Him by Muhammed Kurtcephe. His whole philosophy is Yazarak Yazarum, Yashadiksha Yazarum. I live what I write, and I write what I live. And he's meticulously structured this final pilgrimage chronologically, day by day, complete with geographical markers, precise rulings, everything.
And what's so fascinating about it is that this isn't just biography or, dry history. It's jurisprudence being delivered on the move. So our goal today is to follow that meticulous timeline, to extract the specific legal, social, theological lessons delivered at each and every stopping point.
So we're tracking the physical journey.
Yeah, the physical hardships of the desert right alongside the spiritual clarity of these final pronouncements. This is, in effect, the completion of a mission that spanned more than 2 decades.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we even get to day one of the Prophet's journey in, 632 CE, we have to grasp the sheer gravity of the destination itself.
We do.
The Kaaba. I mean, this site's significance goes way back, predating Islam itself.
Absolutely. To understand the weight of this 20-day journey, we have to recognize the foundational belief that the Kaaba was the very first house of worship established for all of humanity.
Yeah.
The source material establishes its origin with the patriarch Ibrahim, and his son Ishmael. They literally raised the structure from the floor of a desolate valley.
And the imagery that's associated with its completion is it's stunning. Once that final stone was laid, the divine command came down to Abraham.
Yes, and the command was so direct, so universal. Haki ilan et, proclaim the Hajj.
Right.
And Abraham, standing there in this silent, empty valley, he was concerned. I mean, it's a practical concern. How could his human voice possibly reach the masses all across the world from this one uninhabited spot?
And the divine reassurance that comes next is one of the most powerful passages in the entire tradition, isn't it?
It is. Sinseslenik ilan et sesini insanlara oleshtermek bana düşer, which means you just call out and proclaim, it is up to me to make your voice reach humanity.
Wow.
And that call, according to the sources, it resonated universally. It wasn't just heard by people nearby. The entire earth, the spirits, the mountains, the plains, everything responded, and they cried out, Labbaik Allahumma.
Answer your call, oh God. I answer your call.
Exactly. And this is why that phrase, the telbai, is the absolute mantra of the Hajj to this day.
And that really sets the stage for the core rituals, many of which were established right there by Abraham. Rituals that the Prophet Muhammad would later restore to their original purity, like kissing the black stone, the Hasarul Aswad, supplicating at the Wiltazem, that space between the black stone and the Kaaba door, and of course drinking the water of Zemzem.
And what's so critical here is that concept of restoration. You see, over the centuries, these Abrahamic rites had been corrupted. They'd been buried under pagan practices, idol worship. So the final Prophet's Hajj is fundamentally about stripping all of that away and restoring the absolute purity of those original monotheistic rituals.
The emotional context for this return must have been just overwhelming. The Prophet had been forced out of Mecca 6 years earlier, and he remembered that moment saying, "Jikaria masa idim shikmazdem."
If I had not been forced out, I would never have left.
Exactly. And the source describes this intense longing for the Kaaba Uzlam su oldu ekte. The longing flowed like water.
And the physical return, well, it was fraught with historical steps. We briefly remember the foiled Hajj attempt at Hudaybiyah, then the Umratul Qaza, the compensation pilgrimage the year after that. The full return, of course, came with the conquest of Mecca in the 8th year of the Hijra, where the Kaaba was finally emptied of idols.
And crucially, this farewell Hajj, it wasn't just a voluntary trip. It had become a formalized, obligatory ritual, a farz, in the 9th year of the Hijra.
That's right. And that year, Abu Bakr led the pilgrimage, and Ali proclaimed the absolute prohibition of polytheists from ever approaching the Kaaba again. That act of purification, it really finalized the sanctity of the site for this monumental final journey.
Which brings us to the actual starting point, day one.
Day 1, 26 Zilqa'ad, 10 AH. which corresponds to February 22, 632 CE. The Prophet prepares to depart from Medina.
And the logistics alone, they just reveal the scale of this whole undertaking. He appointed Ibn Dukan as a temporary governor. The caravan included all his wives and his daughter Fatima. And he brought this massive sacrifice. 100 sacrificial camels, Kurban Deve, which he entrusted to Nasi bi Kundub. I mean, 100 camels is a serious commitment, financially and logistically.
Oh, absolutely. But even more important than the scale was the intent. Before he even mounted his camel, Kaswa, he made this public declaration about his sincerity, establishing the whole spiritual ethos of the journey. He said, "This is a Hajj in which there is no hypocrisy, riya, or desire for fame."
So right away, it's framed as an act of internal purification.
Exactly, free from any kind of public posturing. It sets the tone for the entire 20 days. They traveled about 10.8 kilometers that first day to a place called Zuhuleif.
Mikat.
The Mikat, yes. The established geographical boundary where pilgrims have to shed their normal status and enter the sacred state of ihram. And they spent the night there.
And day 2, still at Zuhuleif, is just packed with these profound legal rulings and a deeply human moment right at this point of transition.
It is. The legal framework starts with a divine instruction, a vahi delivered by the angel Gabriel during the night. Pray in this blessed valley and intend Hajj in the Umrah.
Okay, so that confirmed that the Prophet would be performing Hajj al-Quran, combining both the Hajj and the Umrah intention because he'd brought his sacrificial animals with him?
That's right. But the personal drama that night was, well, unavoidable. Ibi Bekir's wife, Esma, gave birth to their son, Muhammad.
And childbirth renders a woman ritually impure. She must have been devastated.
She was. She was naturally distraught, fearing her entire Hajj was invalidated before it had even really begun.
And here we get a key piece of merciful jurisprudence that has shaped women's ritual practice ever since. So what was the Prophet's ruling?
He ruled with mercy and with practicality. He said, "Bathe, wrap yourself in a garment, and enter the ihram." This established that natural physical processes do not negate the intention or the spiritual journey of the Hajj. Her joy at being able to continue is specifically mentioned in the sources, which really highlights the relief this ruling provided for her and, for all women after her.
So following that, the Prophet meticulously lays out the general rules for ihram, the rules for entering this sacred state, which are crucial for everyone about to leave Zuhuleif.
Yes, and the list was designed to strip away all markers of normal life and status. So forbidden were tailored clothing like shirts, turbans, trousers, head coverings, or burnous, and crucially, leather socks or mest.
But there was an exception for the socks, wasn't there?
There was, a very practical one. If proper sandals or shoes couldn't be found, the meest could be worn, but, and this is a key detail, they had to be cut below the ankle. Also, any clothing dyed with saffron or safflower was forbidden.
So why this intense focus on what they're wearing? Why cut the socks? What's the symbolism there?
It's all about uniformity and humility. The simple, unstitched white cloth of ihram forces everyone, rich, poor, leader, follower, into this state of visible equality. And the detail about the socks is fascinating because it allows for practicality in a harsh desert environment while still reinforcing that core rule. No tailored clothing that fully encases the foot in the way it does in regular life. It's a very precise balance of law and necessity.
And once they were all in this state of visible equality, the spiritual journey began with that loud, collective chant.
Yes. The Prophet began the Talbih, Lebik Allahum Lebik, and he specifically commanded the tens of thousands of companions to raise their voices. He called this loud proclamation the alamet, the sign or the hallmark of the Hajj. It's the public realization of that ancient call of Abraham, just echoing across the desert as the caravan began its movement toward Beta.
That image, tens of thousands of people stripped of status, chanting as they move across the desert, is incredibly potent. So now we begin the actual road journey, where the spiritual and historical layers just keep unfolding. Day 3 brings us to the Reva Valley.
Reva is described as a valley of paradise, a place of historical echoes. The Prophet paused here not just for rest, but to connect the present Hajj to the long, long chain of prophecy.
Tell us more about those prophetic connections. What did he describe seeing there?
He described seeing Moses, or Musdo, passing through the valley in a short fringed robe, reciting the very same Telbai, just as they were doing.
Wow.
And he provided a prophecy about the future, saying that Jesus, or Maryam and Olu, would pass through the exact same path before the Day of Judgment. So this pause in the desert becomes this profound moment of continuity, reinforcing that the Hajj isn't some isolated event, but a ritual stretching all the way back to the dawn of monotheism.
And right alongside that immense historical scope, we get a small, deeply human moment about inclusivity.
Exactly. A woman lifted up her small son and asked the prophet, "Does he have Hajj?" And the prophet answered, "Yes, and you have the reward."
That's beautiful.
It's an immediate teaching. The spiritual journey is open to all, and the intention, even on behalf of a child, earns merit. Spiritual education begins early, and the parents get the reward for that effort.
The journey continues, of course, through the intense heat of the Arabian Peninsula. And day 5 brings a crucial lesson on leadership and temperance at the stopping point of Suqya. This is the incident of the lost provisions.
This anecdote perfectly illustrates the tension between responsibility and control, especially when you're under the spiritual discipline of ihram. Abu Bakir's servant, Uqbay, was exhausted from the journey, and he lost the camel carrying the provisions for the prophet and his family.
And Abu Bakr, a man known for his incredible spiritual discipline, just completely lost his temper, right? Started striking the servant. Why such an extreme reaction?
Well, his anger wasn't just about the loss of food. It was about the failure of responsibility toward the messenger of God. He yelled, "If only this food were mine alone, it wouldn't matter. But it belonged to the messenger of God and his household." It shows the immense burden of care he felt. But the prophet's intervention is really the key takeaway here.
So how did the prophet intervene, given that Abu Bakr was supposed to be in a state of spiritual peace?
He intervened with gentle humor and a smile. He said, "Look at this man in ihram, see what he is doing." And he gently commanded Abu Bakr to stop, reminding him that Uqbay's distress was rooted in anxiety and fear, not in any malice. The lesson is really twofold. Spiritual discipline has to govern your anger, and compassion has to outweigh the loss of material goods, especially when you're dealing with those under your charge.
And the story ends beautifully, doesn't it? It just demonstrates the community's devotion.
It does. The caravan immediately came together. The Nadle Sulari instantly provided haze, a nutritious blend of dates, flour, and cottage cheese, showing that communal support in a crisis. And then, when the lost camel was found, another companion, Sad bi Ubaid, offered a replacement, heavily loaded with provisions. And the prophet's refusal of that replacement highlights this mutual generosity. He told Sad, "Doesn't what you've done to host us since we came to Medina suffice?"
And Saz's reply is the perfect capstone.
"It is," he says. "The things you have taken from our property are dearer to us than what you have left us." It's just this expression of absolute devotion through hospitality.
Now, day 6 brings us to what is maybe the most poignant, intensely personal moment of the entire 20 days, a stop at a place called Ebba.
Ebba is the eternal resting place of the prophet's mother, Amina. She died when he was only 6 years old. The caravan paused, and the 63-year-old leader of a nation paused at her grave.
The source describes him weeping, just tears flowing freely. Why did he allow himself this profound public display of grief during such a momentous public journey?
It connects his universal mission right back to his intensely personal humanity. When the companions asked him why he was weeping, he replied simply, "I wept thinking of my mother's compassion and mercy toward me." This shows that leadership doesn't strip away the capacity for human grief, for emotional connection to your roots. It grounds the entire experience, reminding the hundreds of thousands present that their leader was, fundamentally, a son.
But the spiritual instruction continues even right there at the graveside.
That tension is constant. Also at Ebva, the prophet had to issue a very strict ruling. A companion, Sa'd bi Abi Waqqas, offered him a gift, a piece of hunted animal. The prophet firmly rejected it, reinforcing the rule. Hunting is absolutely forbidden while in ihram. No practical need or generous gift can override that spiritual state.
So we continue on the road, passing through these historical sites like Usfan Valley, where he remembered prophets Hud and Salih, and then Gamim, the place where Surah Al-Fat, the victory, was revealed after the failed Hudaybiyah treaty.
And that memory at Gamim is essential context. That revelation had promised a safe entry into Mecca, and now, 8 years later, the prophet is passing that very spot, realizing that long-awaited promise. It's a powerful narrative thread of divine patience and eventual fulfillment.
The journey then brings us to day 9, Yom Rosvaran, where another critical legal ruling is delivered, this time dealing with the unavoidable realities of women's lives. This is the incident involving his wife, Ish.
Yes, Aishi experienced her menstrual cycle, and she was heartbroken, fearing she had ruined the Hajj, lamenting, "I wish I had not come out for Hajj this year." She assumed her spiritual intention had been completely invalidated.
So how did the Prophet resolve this, and why is this ruling so foundational for women's jurisprudence in Islam?
The ruling is fundamentally one of mercy and clarity. He consoled her, saying, "This is something God has decreed for the daughters of Adam. Do what the pilgrims do. Only do not perform tawaf around the Kaaba until you are purified."
So it establishes two critical things.
Two critical facts, yes. First, that natural biological processes do not invalidate the overall Hajj. And second, that only the physical act of circumambulating the Kaaba is prohibited until ritual purity is restored. She could participate in all other aspects of the pilgrimage, which confirms the inclusivity and the practicality of the law.
That clarity on the road, balancing intense grief, legal precision, and compassion, brings the caravan to the immediate outskirts of Mecca, arriving at Zituva, ready for the culmination of the journey.
Day 10 is the emotional peak, the embrace of the Kaaba. After 9 long days on the road, facing hardship and giving counsel, the Prophet entered Mecca from Zituva.
Upon seeing the Kaaba, the house of God, he stopped, and he offered this profound prayer, asking God to increase the Kaaba's honor and the honor of its visitors. The energy must have been palpable.
It was. He approached the Hasarul Aswad, the black stone. He touched it, he wept, and then he began the tawaf, the circumambulation. But this wasn't just some quiet ritual. The first part was a strategic physical demonstration.
The famous display of strength. Tell us about the Izdiba and the Remel.
Right. Izdiba is the uncovering of the right shoulder, and Remel is the fast-running steps that are used for the first 3 circuits. This was a deliberate act of, you could say, psychological warfare against the polytheists who were still watching.
So there were rumors that the Muslims were weak.
Yes, rumors had spread that they were frail, weak, sickly, due to the climate change of emigrating to Medina. So the Prophet and his companions used the Remel to demonstrate that they were physically strong, full of vitality, and victorious. It was a physical manifestation of their enduring faith.
The declaration of enduring strength embedded right into the ritual. So during the tawaf, what was the core prayer he kept repeating?
At the Ruknu Yamani corner, the prayer was very succinct, yet it encompassed all needs. Our Lord, grant us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and protect us from the torment of the fire. It captures that holistic balance between worldly benefit and eternal salvation.
After completing the 7 circuits, he stood at Maqam Ibrahim station and recited the verse commanding people to take it as a place of prayer. And then he performed 2 units of prayer, reciting the ultimate statements of monotheism, Surahs Al-Kafirun and Al-Ikhlas.
Following the tawaf, he performed the sa'i, running between Safa and Marwa, which commemorates Hagar's desperate search for water. He performed 7 circuits, reciting the verse confirming the hills are among the signs of God, and he explicitly codified this, saying, "God has made the sa'i obligatory upon you. Perform sa'i."
So the rituals are physically complete. Now comes the legal instruction that determines the fate of the caravan. Many of the companions hadn't brought sacrificial animals.
And this led to the crucial Umrah conversion ruling. He commanded those without a sacrifice to exit their ihram and convert their Hajj intention to an Umrah, which is known as Tamattu Hajj.
Which was revolutionary.
It was revolutionary because it allowed them to fully complete the rites and shed their ihram restrictions until the Hajj properly began again a few days later.
The companions must have been confused. I mean, was this a permanent change or just a temporary concession for this one time?
That was the immediate question. And the Prophet stated emphatically, making it a permanent legal milestone. Umrah has entered into the Hajj. It will continue forever until the day of resurrection. This institutionalized the Tamattu form, making the pilgrimage flexible and accessible for everyone.
Day 11 brings us to Ebta, a valley setting that emphasizes humility, even in the heart of the conquered city.
The Prophet chose to stay in a simple leather tent in Ebta. He consciously declined the invitation of his cousin, Hani, to stay in a house. When he was questioned about this decision, why not take comfortable accommodation, his reply was deeply historical and poignant.
He referenced his family's seizure of property, right?
Yes, he replied. Did Aqil, son of Abu Talib, leave us any house to stay in? This referenced the Meccan houses seized by the polytheist after his forced emigration. He purposefully chose the open valley, near the path to the cave of Hira, as a deliberate act of humility. It was a physical reminder to everyone that Islam's roots were difficult, humble, and founded on sacrifice, not on reclaiming lost property or living in luxury.
And day 12 is the Zinat Gunu, decoration day, and it brings Ali, who had been away in Yemen collecting zakat. This moment really clarifies the difference between the Hajj types.
Ali arrived and was, astonished to find his wife, Fatima, out of ihram. She was wearing dyed clothes and eyeliner, surmi all forbidden for pilgrims. She calmly explained that her father had commanded her to do this, having converted her Hajj to tamattu.
So Ali immediately sought clarification, and the Prophet confirmed Fatuma's obedience to the new ruling. But Ali had a dilemma about his own intention.
Right, because since he had left for Yemen without specifying his type of Hajj, he needed guidance. And his declaration of loyalty to the Prophet is beautiful. I intended whatever my messenger intended. Since the Prophet had brought sacrificial animals, Ali was automatically categorized as performing Qiran Hajj, combining both rituals.
And the Prophet commanded Ali, I have my sacrificial animal with me, so do not exit ihram, which means Ali had to wait for the day of sacrifice, unlike those performing tamattu.
Exactly. And this whole exchange served as a crucial lesson for everyone there. The rules of ihram are strict for those who bring the sacrifice, like Ali and the Prophet, performing Quran, but they're mercifully relaxed for the vast majority who did not, performing tamattu, allowing them a period of rest and normalization between the Umrah and the main Hajj rituals.
Day 13, the 8th of Zilhijjah, known as Turvi Day, marks the move from Mecca into the Great Plains of Mina, where the major rites are about to begin.
And the Prophet's conduct in Mina continued this theme of humility. He explicitly refused a sun shelter, stating, Mina is the place for the one who arrives first to make his camel kneel. He maintained this principle of equality and simplicity, even while Bilal tried to follow him, shading him with a cloth on a stick.
And the Prophet used his time in Mina to deepen the pilgrim's connection to history and to ritual.
Yes. He spoke of the Haif Mosque, Matidi Haif, noting that 70 prophets, including Moses, had prayed there, and he connected the stoning ritual, which was about to begin, to the area's history, tracing its origins all the way back to Ishmael's historical stoning of the devil. So the rituals they were about to perform, they weren't new. They were restorative, reaching back into foundational history.
This all prepares us for Day 14, 9 Zilhijjah Arafat Day, the Hajj Akbar, the Great Hajj, and the absolute core of the entire 20-day journey.
This is the destination, the great migration of, well, over 120,000 people moved toward Arafat. And it's important to note how the Prophet consciously broke with the customs of Jahiliyyah, the age of ignorance. The tribal elite traditionally stopped at Muzdalifah, believing Arafat was somehow beneath them. But the Prophet insisted on proceeding straight to Arafat immediately, establishing ritual equality for absolutely everyone.
And he stood on his camel, Kaswa, in the Urana Valley, delivering a sermon that has defined Islamic society and law ever since. We need to analyze this address in depth.
This is the moment where the mission is sealed. He began with a profound warning of finality, and he repeated it 3 times. I do not know, perhaps I will not meet you in this place after this year. This instantly commanded absolute attention and weighted every single word that followed with the solemnity of a last testament.
He then laid the groundwork for the sanctity of the new society, establishing that life, property, and honor are untouchable, sacred, just like the sanctity of that day, that month, and that place. But the most revolutionary part came next, the complete abolition of the old, corrupt systems.
And this is where we have to contextualize the Jahiliyyah. Blood feuds, or kandavalari, meant cyclical, never-ending revenge killings that just crippled families and tribes for generations. And usury, or riba, meant the wealthy perpetually enslaved the poor through crippling debt interest. The whole society was predicated on this injustice.
So how did he abolish these systems?
He established the law of universal application by starting with his own family. He abolished all blood feuds, beginning with the claim arising from his cousin's son, Ibn Rabia B. Harris. And he abolished all usury claims, starting with the immense financial claims of his own uncle, Abbas B. Abdul Muttalib.
Why was it so revolutionary that he started with his own relatives?
Because it sealed his personal integrity and the universality of the law. If the Prophet himself and his immediate family were still subject to the new law, if they sacrificed their own personal claims for the sake of universal justice, then no one could argue that the law only applied to the weak. It instantly established the rule of law as absolute and impartial.
The sermon then shifted to social justice, specifically addressing the rights and responsibilities concerning women.
He urged them to fear God regarding women, stressing they are a trust from God. This phrase, a trust from God, is the core ethic. It elevates women's status far, far above mere property or chattel, which was common in that era.
He also balanced this with responsibilities.
Yes. He stated men had rights, primarily fidelity and not having unwanted guests in the home. Women had rights to food and clothing based on common custom and good faith. While the source does note permission for separation or gentle discipline in cases of clear defiance, the overriding ethical principle is the protection of that trust and the strong caution against any excessive harm. The primary takeaway is the elevation of women to the status of a divine trust.
And then the ultimate statement of universal equality, a direct rejection of the tribal, race-based hierarchies that defined Arabia.
He said, "Your Lord is one and your Father is one. You are all from Adam and Adam is from dust." This is a monumental concept. It eliminates all notions of racial or ethnic superiority. The only measure he allowed for differentiation was taqwa, piety, and consciousness of God. No superiority of Arab over non-Arab or white over black. This statement dismantled centuries of tribal hierarchy in a single address.
He concluded by defining his permanent legacy, telling the gathered masses what they must hold on to prevent deviation.
He left them two things: the Book of God, the Quran, and the Sunnah of his Prophet, the example of his life. He urged them to hold fast to these two to avoid ever going astray, and he finalized the address by stressing accountability. They would meet their Lord, who would question them about their deeds. The gravity of their individual responsibility was made crystal clear.
Now, for the moment, that perfectly encapsulates the end of his entire mission. As the prophet concluded, the angel Gabriel brought the final verse of the Quran.
The famous verse from Surah Al-Maid, verse 3. "Today I have perfected your religion for you, completed my favor upon you, and chosen for you Islam as your religion." The sources say that the camel, Qaswa, actually sank slightly under the immense weight of this final revelation. The mission, the final blueprint, was officially complete.
And the atmosphere, we're told, was one of pure joy. The religion was perfect, the mission finished. But Abu Bakr, the prophet's closest companion, he saw the truth behind the completion.
What's so fascinating here is the immediate instinctive realization of Abu Bakr. While everyone else was rejoicing, he began to weep silently. He realized that if the religion was perfected, the messenger's job was done. The completion of the mission signaled the imminent departure of the prophet. The source calculates that only 93 days remained of the prophet's life, and this realization, it makes his insight the ultimate aha moment of this deep dive.
After the sermon and the revelation, the prophet performed the necessary combination of prayers due and ours, combining and shortening them to 2 units each, or qasr, a ruling that remains a precedent for travelers.
Then came the moment of profound supplication for his community's forgiveness. Ummeti, ummeti. God answered, forgiving all of his community except those who had committed zulm, injustice against one another.
But the prophet didn't stop there. He prayed again, asking God, who has the power to give the oppressed person paradise, to forgive the oppressor as well. This moment of immense clemency set the tone for the move to Muzdalifah.
Upon arriving at Muzdalifah deep in the night, he combined the Maghrib and Isha prayers. And here's the emotional pivot. After the intense weight of Arafat, the prophet laughed.
He laughed for the first time since leaving Medina. Why this sudden joy right after the most serious day of his life?
He explained that Satan and his army were watching from the mountains, wondering what fate awaited the pilgrims. When Satan learned that God had accepted the prophet's prayer and forgiven the community, he cried out in despair, "Woe, we are destroyed!" The prophet's laughter was a celebration of that final cosmic victory over Satan's despair, a perfect emotional release after the theological intensity of Arafat.
Day 15 is 10 Zilhijjah, the day of sacrifice, Eid al-Adha. The action is swift and highly regulated. They moved quickly from Muzdalifah toward Mina just before sunrise.
The first ritual was the stoning of the devil at Jamra al-Aqaba. And even in this intense ritual, the prophet preached gentleness and order. He cautioned against haste and overcrowding. Be gentle, people. Hurry is not piety. He demonstrated the proper technique, throwing 7 small stones, fisk tashlara. This focus on safety and gentleness in a chaotic environment is a powerful leadership lesson.
Then came the massive act of sacrifice. He sacrificed 63 camels, 1 for each year of his life, and Ali sacrificed the remaining animals from the original 100.
And the rules surrounding the distribution of the sacrifice were just as important as the act itself. He ensured a piece of meat from each sacrifice was cooked and eaten communally, making sure the blessing was shared. But crucially, he laid down a critical ethical rule by instructing Ali to distribute the meat, skin, and trappings to the poor. Do not give the heads and feet of the sacrifices as payment to the butcher.
Why was that rule so essential? Not paying the butcher with the sacrificial meat.
Because it created a clear boundary between commerce and charity. The sacrifice is intended purely for the benefit of the poor and as an act of worship. It can't be co-opted as an economic tool or a wage. It protects the integrity of the charitable act.
Following the sacrifice, he had his head shaved, confirming that women should only trim their hair, not shave. He then applied perfume and put on his normal clothing, shedding the physical restrictions of ihram.
He spent the rest of the day providing practical rulings. Many pilgrims, overwhelmed by the intensity, asked if they could deviate from the prescribed order of the rituals, maybe stoning before sacrificing or shaving before stoning. His reply was consistently flexible. Perform it. There is no blame. This pragmatic mercy ensured that minor logistical confusion did not invalidate the immense effort of the pilgrimage.
He concluded the primary rituals by returning to Mecca to perform the tawaf al-ifada, the ziyarah tawaf, followed by drinking Zamzam water. Even here, his consideration for others stood out. He refrained from helping pull water from the well himself, saying, "If I were not concerned about people overwhelming you, the caretakers, I would pull water with you."
Days 16 and 17, still spent in Mina, were dedicated to consolidating and reiterating the message of Arafat. The Prophet repeated the core tenets of the farewell sermon, the sanctity of life, abolition of riba and blood feuds, and explicitly instructed the pilgrims to convey the message to those absent, making them messengers of his final will.
He also delivered specific advice regarding the ethical treatment of servants and slaves, a crucial step in the movement toward humane labor practices.
This advice was groundbreaking. Feed them what you eat, clothe them what you wear. If they commit a fault you can't forgive, they could be sold. But the crucial ethical limit was non-negotiable. Do not torture them. This established a fundamental principle of human dignity and restraint, even in relationships of authority.
There's also a beautiful anecdote from Mina about the contented youth.
Yes, a youth from the Banu Tajib tribe was praised by the Prophet. While his delegation received many gifts, this young man asked for nothing but forgiveness, mercy, and contentment. The Prophet recognized this profound inner satisfaction with God's provision, a great spiritual virtue.
Moving to days 18 and 19 at Ebda, we handle the final personal and legal arrangements. First, accommodating Aisha's missed ritual.
Right. Since she had missed the Umrah portion due to her menstrual cycle, the Prophet commanded her brother Abdurrahman to take her to Tanim that night to enter ihram and perform the Umrah, then return quickly. This was a specific accommodation to allow her to complete the spiritual component she intended.
Day 19 also brought the poignant story of Sadbi Abi Vakas, a wealthy companion who was grievously ill and feared dying in Mecca, the place of his emigration.
The Prophet comforted him. "You will not die, God willing." But the illness prompted a key legal question. Saad, who was wealthy and only had one daughter as an heir, asked if he could donate all, then 2/3 of his wealth to charity via his will, or wasiyah.
And the Prophet's ruling here became a foundational law of inheritance designed to protect the economic future of the heirs.
Precisely. He permitted only 1/3, explaining, 1/3 is plenty. It is better to leave your heirs wealthy than to leave them poor, begging from people. This ruling prevents emotionally motivated decisions from crippling the financial stability of future generations. It's a pillar of family financial law.
And as a final act of holistic care, the Prophet extended his guidance into health, diagnosing Saad with a heart ailment and prescribing a specific medicinal mixture of 7 ajwa dates mixed with water and cedar. Saad recovered, demonstrating that the Prophet's counsel extended to all practical matters of life.
And finally, day 20, 15 Zilhijjah, Al-Wada Mecca, farewell Mecca, the ultimate departure.
Before dawn, the Prophet performed the tawaf al-wada, the farewell tawaf. The physical act of supplication was just heavy with finality. He pressed his chest and his face against the multazim, supplicating like a slave begging at his master's door.
And during the concluding prayer, he read Surah at Tur, the Mount, a powerful reminder of God's power and the certainty of the Day of Judgment. The choice of Surah emphasized the accountability he had spoken of at Arafat.
The journey concluded on March 12, 632 CE. This was his last visit, his last tawaf, his last stand at Arafat. It is a profoundly bittersweet moment of closure for the mission, knowing that his companions would return to Mecca alone only a few months later.
When we look back at these 20 days, the structure that Kurtcephe provides shows us a leader who was meticulous, comprehensive, and intensely human. The journey was physically grueling, a 400-kilometer trek across the desert, but it was simultaneously the final assembly of law and social justice.
We saw the abolition of centuries of entrenched injustice, the end of cyclical blood feuds and the economic oppression of riba juxtaposed with the establishment of universal equality. And he didn't just preach equality. He demonstrated it by sacrificing his own family's historical claims first.
This historical account is far more than just a timeline of rituals. It's a leader detailing his entire mission's legacy, addressing every facet of society, from global jurisprudence down to the treatment of servants, the rules of inheritance, and even medical advice. He understood the completion of his mission meant his time was short, and he used this massive public gathering to ensure the foundation was solid and perfectly clear.
And for you, the learner, that detailed chronological structure shows that spiritual and societal transformation is built not on sudden, vague ideals, but on day-by-day clarity, consistency, and the practical application of law, even when it's inconvenient.
Which leaves us with the ultimate provocative thought based on the profound emotional swings we tracked. The prophet smiled when he saw Satan defeated at Muzdalifa, celebrating that universal cosmic victory and the forgiveness of his community. Yet only days earlier, he wept intensely at his mother's grave at Ebva, demonstrating intensely personal human grief. What does this contrast between universal victory over evil and the simple, deep sorrow of a son tell us about the absolute necessity of integrating human emotion and profound spiritual discipline in effective leadership? It is a balance worth mulling over.
Thank you for joining us on this extraordinary 20-day deep dive. We look forward to exploring the next essential narrative with you soon.